Hello again and welcome to another Articulate Outburst podcast. I think I've mentioned before we're experimenting with hats. Emails seem to suggest that the red one looks slightly better than the blue, but I've not had a multitude of votes, so if you fancy it, put a comment in the comments box on the video or email me. All the details are in the show notes. Most people seem to choose email. I guess that's not wanting to perhaps declare anything on social media, but email, text, whatever you want to do, all my numbers are on there. Please get in touch. So as I said before, we're experimenting with hats. I'll leave it on for the full duration of the podcast, and there we go. So I think on the previous podcast we're talking about the new album, and we're in the studio very shortly, and what I wanted to do is, rather than constantly looking back and retrospectively on the reasons why we do something, it'd be great to share with you something that's happening in real time. I'm going to do the 3 songs that we're recording, which is SANDSTORM, 1984 and Blue Checkmarks. And obviously I think I mentioned in the previous stream we're a little bit more mature musically. We've evolved into a little bit more of a subtlety to our lyrics, a little bit more mysterious. If I mention dystopian again, I'll end up kicking myself. But ultimately, that's where we're at with that. So SANDSTORM, what's it about? I don't really want to go through the lyrics, I don't really want to sing it. I mean, we have played it live a few times, and we're playing Saturday, if anyone wants to come down, playing at the Primrose, although this stream will go out after that, so the next time you'll see us is on the 11th of November at Holbeck Working Men's Club, where it's our first headline slot. There's a Macmillan Cancer Charity Day, and bands from all over Leeds between 2 o'clock in the afternoon and 11 o'clock at night, including us, we're on last, for a really worthy cause. If you can't come, donations would be great. If you go to our Facebook page, there's a link. Any money that you can contribute would be much appreciated. I realise that Christmas is just around the corner and not a lot of spare dough about, but either way, if you can chip something in, it would be much appreciated. But there's 10 bands, there's more than 10 bands on the day who are all giving up their time for this slot and for this. And you'll be entertainment guaranteed. So 11th of November, Holbeck Working Men's Club in Leeds. I think we're on about 10 o'clock at night, but don't just come to see us, come to see everybody. Try to get there at a reasonable time, take as much of it in as you can. These are great local bands in the area, and some real talent. We've played with some of these bands before. They're a real talent, they're really good fun. So, turning to the new album, I think I mentioned it before, it's Heroes and Bad Actors. There's several kind of points to the album, which I'll show over the next few streams. I don't really want to kind of show my hand in advance. The band hate it when I say what's coming up. They prefer to do a big reveal once it's finished, but that's not always possible when you try to do a weekly podcast and get people interested and engaged in the music. So SANDSTORM is about the confusion that we see because of media, I won't say manipulation, but the way in which it's all run, the way in which it reveals its stories, the timing of some stories as well, which hasn't gone unnoticed. I've got a couple of examples here where I think that something was strange by Wyatt, and the timings of certain releases of certain stuff, and certain things definitely not being covered. We've hardly had any coverage of the Ukraine war for the last 6 months, which suggests things might not be going quite so well as we thought they were. But again, the song is called SANDSTORM, and the first kind of line is keeping us all confused so no one knows what to do. The media and the news, the channels show all the views, contradictions and all sorts, many conflicting thoughts, all designed to hide the truth, and then there's one that just sneaks through. And what this can be sometimes, we are bombarded with stories. I know it sounds ridiculous and perhaps not a great example, but on my Facebook page and on my social media page, if there's not a story about Carol Vorderman and her sex life on my page every day, I'd probably miss it if it was gone. And it's like, not only am I not interested in this, why are you pushing this junk my way? Why is Carol Vorderman's sex life the most important thing for some newspapers to be pushing? On top of that, I've got Helen Skelton, the breakup, the divorce. Never shown any interest in either of these women, yet I get bombarded from the newspapers about what they're up to, who said what. Oh, it's just absolute dross. I don't know whether that's to force me to go out to buy a paper, which I've not done for several. Well, I buy a paper when I'm coming home on a plane, but very quickly into it you start seeing the wheels going round, and you start seeing that they're not quite either not being truthful, not covering the story in the way that you want, and not giving a balanced view. In the old days, a paper would say, this would be one view, this would be the other view, and then sometimes they'd even put a neutral view. That seems to have gone now. So the whole SANDSTORM thing was my frustrations. And the second part of the first verse is, throwing up a cloud of meteor dust, swirling, whirling, the colour of rust, like gravel sands through my hands. Dust is dust and the truth is lost. Objectives pushed through, always out of view. No scrutiny, no double check. Knapsack, marching on, all the things we've counted on. And then we're into the chorus. I'm not going to go through the whole lyrics of the song. But that's kind of indicative of what I now see the media to be, social media to be. A little bit of YouTube, you've got to pick and choose which channels you want to watch for certain things. In the old days, you could put BBC on and you pretty much get a basket of goods. You get the quizzes, you get a bit of news, you get a bit of entertainment. Now I just see a narrative being pushed that's unnatural. I see that storylines are getting storylines inserted into them that would never ever be true. We're getting a demographic change in Emmerdale that's just, you take one drive into the countryside and show me that community. So these things are just not reflective of what we're actually seeing. I understand that we've got to kind of share the sweeties out at the playground as evenly as we can, but when they no longer seem to make sense, at what point do people stop watching them? So there's a couple of things I'd like to kind of go through which kind of really got the SANDSTORM, because it is a bit of a whirl. A lot of people don't know what's going on. I think that was particularly through the, how can I put it, I can't call it a pandemic because, we'll call it the pandemic for mathematical simplicity. During the pandemic, legitimate views, now proven to be quite legitimate and from trusted sources, were silenced. There was a narrative. Only one narrative was allowed. But I'll leave it there. Anybody that spoke against that narrative was silenced, shut down. And I think the Twitter files, the Matthew at Congress, says it all really as to what was effectively going on. But I can't really talk about. This is one of the subjects that we can't talk about because certain things are, how can I put this? There are certain things that can't be talked about no matter how much you think you've got free speech. We do not. And I'm not going to get a sanction. But that's one thing. So ultimately, there's another thing that I think is pervasive within the news, and that's anything that's related to there's a grooming gang scandal in the north of England, a grooming gang scandal that's been going on for a very, very long time that nobody reports or discusses. And when said grooming gangs do get to court, there's a kind of a tepid. First of all, there's no, if you look at the Jimmy Savile and Rolf Harris, the Rolf Harris and Stuart Hall cases, we saw Rolf having his breakfast, we saw him running to court, we saw his pictures in court, and we saw him coming home every day of the week of his trial. The grooming gangs, you don't see them. You see it afterwards, it's packaged. There's no blow by blow, there's no day by day, there's no, how can I put it, fly on the wall coverage. There's never any panorama or any Newsnight follow-ups of, interviews with the victims that can black them out. There's never any in-depth stories as to why it's familial. Why is it familial? And then you've got the newspapers, and the one that I used, perhaps the most kind of telling one was the Telford one, whereby it had been convicted on the Monday, and the papers didn't release it until the Thursday before a Good Friday. So there were no chance for people to pick over the bone for that. We were into the Easter weekend, people were on holiday, and I've all started to look for these. I won't mention any other examples lest it be said that I'm giving something undue prominence, which it isn't. But there's been also another terrorist incident, a female, where the newspaper, again on a Friday, 5 o'clock, so it misses the weekly news cycle, kind of gets buried, where they couldn't even bring themselves to say the word starting in T and ending in ism. They started off with Blackburn Lays woman, who lost a job at Debenhams traded thousands of messages with ISIS. And you think, oh, hang on. So all of a sudden where she lived, what she used to do for a living, and then, oh, by the way, she was also committing acts of terrorism. And if you go to the story, obviously it's the judge made excuses for her. I think this was a time in your life, all this. And I'm thinking, well, why is she not saying this? Why is the judge saying it over? So there are certain things that get glared at, and there are certain things that don't. And you know, to use more recent examples would be Hugh Edwards. Whatever's gone on there, as we've all got a load of sympathy for him and his family, as we have for Philip Schofield, another one. Yet they were kind of portrayed as victims. They weren't all over them. The vultures weren't picking over the corpses. There were a few pictures here and there. It were all about the fallout with his presenter. Not many people getting into the murkiness of his relationship with the 17-year-old lover that Schofield knew. And Hugh Edwards, another penchant for 17-year-old boys. Nothing at all. Nothing in any great depth. Sympathy for the family. Oh, he's going through a stressful job, and you look back at some of these reviews of him being preaching and being, how can I put it, holier than thou. And you know, I'm not bothered about that. But you can't have done what you've done and be holier than thou and be respected in other ways. So there's a massive contradiction there. And then you kind of say, well, where is the detail? Where is these? Where's the outcome? I mean, we all pay our money to the BBC. We surely we're entitled to know what's going on with one of our favourite presenters who we've made obviously a very rich man over time. Schofield's slightly different. I don't think anybody's done an in-depth story on how long he'd known the boy, because he knew him when he was younger. And okay, the 17 is above the age of consent, there's no argument with that, but obviously there were plans in place in Schofield's head well before that. Or was there? That's the big question. So I think that's a question that really needed to be explored, yet no one's really explored it. Nobody's really blown it, and it won't be long before Schofield's back on TV, showing a little bit of contrition, wringing his hands, looking sorry for himself, and then the world moves on. Then you contrast that to, say, Lawrence Fox, who said some stupid barroom comments in an interview. Okay, we're after the watershed, it were after 9 o'clock, and they were speaking frankly about each other. And they've been all over him like a cheap suit, sacked from GB News. Yeah, I'm sure if in hindsight he could have retracted those comments, but ultimately from his point of view, I think he was making a point, a legitimate point incredibly badly, that this kind of, you know, it is a legitimate point that male suicide is a massive problem. That need to come and watch Articulate Outburst a bit more. Get yourself into something, get yourself a hobby, get yourself a distraction. Set up your own band, sing about stuff. Great therapy. But she did belittle that male suicide and tried to turn it into the culture war and the gender wars that simply don't exist. Or maybe do, but not as inflated as they would say. And all of a sudden GB News now is on the rack, and I'm thinking, hang on a minute. BBC's had Savile, it's had Dave Lee Travis, it's had Hugh Edwards, it's had the boat out covered up for Russell Brand. Where is their judgment day? Where is their judgment day? It was Brand on the radio with Jonathan Ross. No one's calling for the BBC to go. So it's that kind of contradiction where the friend-enemy distinction, Carl Schmitt said, it's all right when we do it, but if you do it, we're going to disagree with it. So that's what's driven SANDSTORM. I'm using obviously more modern kind of situations than when I wrote it, but that's the kind of storm cloud it throws up. It's almost like, you know, the old westerns where the baddie had chucked sand in the goodie's eyes. So it's that, and I think that's pervasive through and through. There's absolutely no in-depth discussions on the WEF. There's no in-depth discussions on the UN and all these different factors and these kind of global overreaching arguments. There's no counter-narrative to the green agenda. I'm sure there is one, but you know, what is it? Could we not just plant a load of trees if you got 100-ton tree log? There's a lot of Range Rovers that has captured the carbon from, and no one's saying, well, why that doesn't work, why £1 billion worth of solar and wind have to be the obvious solution when there's a cheaper one out there. So that's really kind of what's driven SANDSTORM, and that's coming up when in the studio. There's going to be some video footage of the studio of us recording these songs, and then pretty soon after, once it's been mastered, they will be on our normal streaming platforms for your perusal. So yeah, looking forward to it. So it's nice to do a stream in real time, and it's nice to do a stream about something that's up and coming rather than constantly reflecting back. So SANDSTORM, it's about media manipulation, it's about confusion and keeping everybody guessing as to what's going on, when really there's other issues there that kind of need to be addressed. And the Ukraine war is the elephant in the room as well. That's not mentioned in the song, but it's an indication of when things are not getting reported. You think, well, hang on a minute, what's going on there? When things are getting reported, what's going on there? So you kind of get that mix. So there we go, up and coming. Next time on the stream, next week's stream will be 1984. Obviously, I've been reading quite a bit of George Orwell actually, and Academic Agent's done quite a bit on George Orwell recently as well, because obviously as time goes on, obviously as censorship becomes a thing, obviously as more things are being inserted into our history that perhaps were not there once before. But I'll cover that in the next stream. You know, that's self-evident, horrible histories will tell you that. So that's the media covered off, that's SANDSTORM. Most importantly, it's absolutely great music. It's some overarching guitars, there's a guitar solo in it. Can't wait for you all to hear it, but thanks very much for listening, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one, and again, if you could subscribe, like, ring the bell, and share the video as much and as widely as you could, that'd be much appreciated. I'll see you in the next one, thank you.